very big, and content creation is very secure job. The only thing is, we don't swirl. Questions were his. Those rapid fire were Arjun's questions.
Thank you, Arjun. जिंदगी में सिर्फ एक ही बार प्यार होता है. Now,
is that how you reached your wife in the end?
I lucked out. बड़े-बड़े देशों में छोटी-छोटी बातें होती रहती हैं. Just move on. My kids, they don't love me, and I think I messed up. But at least I tried.
Rift with Ashneer Grover.
I can't explain it. That's the only sentence I have. I've never met him. I don't know him.
ये सब दोगलापन है.
I don't know what's up with him.
Hello and welcome to another episode of SpotOn with Gaurie Dwivedi, and I've got a very interesting guest. I hate to admit at the start of this conversation that I hadn't read his books. He's done some epic level work, is what he's going to tell me more about. He speaks to people in the language that they understand. It's epic level communication that I hope I manage to learn as we go along. Thank you so much, Ankur, for speaking to me.
Thank you so much, Gaurie. Thank you for having me.
So Ankur Warikoo, you've written a couple of books, you talk to youngsters, you speak the language they want to hear, and you speak on subjects that matter to them. I want to first ask you, what got you into writing and in this whole communication business?
There are multiple facets to that question. Firstly, writing. I've been writing for a really long time. Right from school, I wrote for the school magazine. I loved writing. In 2005, when I was a business school student, I created a blog, which was my first public appearance as a writer, if you will. And if I go back and read those blog posts, which by the way are still existent, I'm like, kaun hai ye? Like, I just can't relate to that person anymore because I was just blabbering my way through what was life like as a business school student and everything that I was going through. And I continued writing. I still write every day.
But you never wanted to be an author, right? Till you discovered this along the way.
I didn't even imagine myself to be. For me, the impression of an author, Gaurie, was either you're a professional author, so you do this for a living, which was very clear. I wasn't good enough ever to do this for a living. I don't think so. I still am. So if I ever write a book, there'll be like this magnum opus that will come towards the end of my life and it'll be a memoir or an autobiography or something like that, which will just chronicle my life. I didn't think I would be writing a book a year, which I have now for the last 4 years. And the credit of that goes to Chiki Sarkar, who is the founder of Juggernaut, an incredible woman. I did not know of her, and we just happened to be on stage together for an event. This was 2016. And I had a fun conversation. I was just by myself, and she has a knack, I believe, of just picking up stories from people. So she sent me an email and saying, hey, it looks like you have a lot of books in you. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Yeah. I don't think I have a book in me, if at all. And then she was like, well, if you ever consider, then just let me know. And I started creating content actively. And I've been doing it for a really long while, but it became a thing. And then people started asking me, are you writing a book? Are you writing a book? And I was like, okay, maybe I should. And then I remembered Chiki's words. So I went back to her, and this was 2020. I was like, I think I'm ready to write a book. I don't know what it will be, but if you're still okay and the offer that you made last time, I would love for you to publish my first book. And that's how the book came along. And then to her credit, just as she is, she's like, you produce so many videos on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, and you create so much of content. Why would you think of a book as just a one-time thing? It should be a yearly thing. Just keep producing books. It's part of your content plan. And that's when I decided that I'll write a book a year. So this is the 4th book, and I'm happy that I am where I am.
Good. But you know what I found very interesting was that your books are almost an extension of your conversations, yes. Right? I mean, you can pick up any page, and it's like, there's not like a single theme in terms of, you've got to read the page before to be able to understand. That isn't the case.
That isn't the case.
And that's a huge departure from how books are written,
Exactly.
Isn't it?
Exactly. So I often say this, if you are a devoted reader, you will hate my books. I shouldn't be winning any critics award, and I don't think I'll ever. I shouldn't be there on any literary awards or any author, writer nomenclature. I'm writing for an audience that doesn't read books. I'm writing for a generation that has stopped reading or has perhaps never read any book ever. And I have to appeal to their senses because they're so used to just swiping things up, and 60 seconds is the max that they will devote to any content piece. So why would they give 2 hours or 3 hours to a book? It has to catch their senses. And the way that I thought about that was, I don't want to write a story. I just want to write one page at a time, one clickable content piece. So if Instagram Reels were to be a book, what would that book look like? That is what I wanted to write.
Okay.
And I'm glad that I've touched the chord with people when it comes to that. It's largely written for 18 to 30-year-olds, very young population, which is the same population I speak to through my content as well. It's not for the discerning reader. It's not for the active reader. They will find it very disconcerting. They will find it all over the place. I will never have a good rating on Goodreads. I will never win any accolades out there. And I'm completely okay with that because I don't want to be in there. But I'm glad that this experiment of mine worked, and now I just want to take that forward.
You're right about the fact that to a traditional reader audience, it's a little different because I picked it up because before having this conversation, I want to really know the book and more about it. Short sentences,
Yes.
some disjointed stuff being put
Yes.
together in a single page.
Yes.
That's essentially what it is.
Yes.
So, but the fact is, the larger thing which I want to come to, which is that, do people need this kind of career advice, and is this where young people are moving towards?
I feel there has to be a curated fashion of delivery for any advice that is to be given around career, around money, around relationships, or what have you. The problem that exists today is that of abundance. There's so much content that hits them that they have no way of processing it. They're just absorbing it. It remains at the surface, and then they move on to the next content and the next content and the next content. So what a book does is when you're reading it, you can't be doing anything else. It's the most active form of consumption. And that's what I would love for them to at least get started with. Will a book like this answer all their questions around career? Absolutely not. But will it ignite any question in that which they may hopefully go about and seek? I'd like to believe so. And at least the initial reaction suggests as well. The last book that I wrote around money propelled the same thing. Did it answer all the questions around personal finance? No. But did it get people thinking and asking questions around investing, how to save, how to earn money, how to plan, budget? Yes. And it just sets them up on a path. And for them, it's their path to choose, and whether they pursue it or not is their decision. But if I can spark that direction in them, I'll consider my job done. And that's the same intent. It's like if there was a way that you could just browse through career reels, but there isn't, unfortunately. That's what the book does.
You talk a lot about passion, you talk a lot about value, in your career advice as well. At a time like now, how do you even talk about passion in terms of a sustainable career? Because, I see so many youngsters who cannot, imagine a career which they will do even for 10 years,
Yes.
forget about longer. So how do you sort of put your passion into a career path which is about, if not your entire life, then at least a large portion of it?
That's a great question, and I think passion is frankly the only answer in today's world, because when we were growing up, we didn't have passion as a concept. We just had career outcomes. So it was a doctor, a journalist, an engineer, a CA,
Tick marks.
a lawyer.
It was about tick boxes. Correct the right boxes. Yeah.
Yahi sab hai, and these are the options, and now you go to pursue it. And there was a very set path to do that. There were exams to clear, there were colleges to get into, and then there were jobs that you would pursue. But if you really think about it, what makes Gaurie Gaurie? What makes Ankur Ankur? It's not the fact that you are a journalist or a content writer or an entrepreneur or a lawyer or a CA. There's something about you that sparks that occupation in you, but it's possible it would spark several other occupations that you just haven't had the opportunity to explore.
Yeah.
So what a passion discovery does is it doesn't bind you to an occupation, it doesn't bind you to an economic role, it binds you to a way of thinking. So if your passion is meeting people, if your passion is sales, if your passion is creation, if your passion is writing, if your passion is singing, if your passion is sports, physical activity, if your passion is operations, if your passion is management, there are so many jobs that will get created. In fact, it's quite possible that by the time you're ready for a job, the jobs you were preparing for don't even exist. But there's a whole new set of jobs that have emerged because how rapidly the world has changed. And if you were stuck preparing yourself for that job, which doesn't exist anymore, you will feel worthless. But if you were fixated on finding where your passion extends, you will never be at a loss. You'll never feel stuck. That is why I think this generation will either prosper or will be doomed forever. Because, again, as I said, we're living in an era of abundance. There are so many choices. that it's not actually a good place to be, it's a very confusing place to be. And that's why you need to focus. And I believe the focus has to be passion and it not occupation.
Traditionally it's about, you follow your passion when you don't have, you have comfortable settings. You can afford to be a risk taker.
Yeah.
I mean, what about people who are risk averse? Where do they go? And there are a fair number of people who do not have comfortable settings.
Exactly.
They've got to still tick the right boxes because it matters.
Yes.
What happens to those?
So the book speaks about that. And the book says there's this usual quote, which is classified motivational, quit your job to follow your passion. I find that the most ridiculous, useless, foolish advice that one can get. Because you don't want to quit your job to follow your passion and then find yourself yearning to not even have financial stability.
Yeah.
Passion will not feed you from day one. You will become what I call a struggling idealist who believes that they should have done this, but they're constantly feeling cornered or feeling stuck. What I propose is today's world offers this opportunity where, let's say you have a day job and you just have that job knowing that it's not going to be what you end up doing for your rest of the life, but it pays the bills. It just keeps the ship afloat. It ensures that you have a certain lifestyle that you're not compromising on. But then you devote your nights, your weekends, your holidays towards exploration, genuinely becoming a student and saying, hey, I'd like to see what digital marketing is about. So let me pick up a few courses. Let me join a few forums. Let me do some few internships, some projects. Let me, by the end of this 30-day exercise, answer this question, did I like that or not? And if the answer is yes, extend it. If the answer is no, move on to the next one. And it's very interesting. I relate this to something weirdly not relevant, but I think it is. We don't have a culture of dating. Our culture is get married really fast. And it's propelled by Bollywood as well. Zindagi mein sirf ek hi baar pyar hota hai and all of those things. But if we had a culture of dating, what dating does is it doesn't make you a flirter, doesn't make you a vagabond. What it does is it really helps
Choices.
you. It helps you discover what kind of a person do you prosper with and what kind of person do you become in front of someone else. So it really helps you explore yourself and, of course, the person opposite. Now, similarly,
is that how you reached your wife in the end?
I lucked out. No, so I'm such a hypocrite when I'm giving this advice. I completely lucked out. And I say I lucked out because it's so magical that it was the first relationship I had, as the only relationship I had. We met each other at 19, committed ourselves at 20, married ourselves at 27 after 7 years. And my life could have been very, very different if that gamble didn't pay off. It just thankfully paid off and I'm super lucky. But that was a not smart move, I would argue. So I would not advise that to my kids at all. I'd be like, please go ahead and explore and find out who you are. And the same thing, please go and date careers as well. Why wouldn't you date careers? Like, what kind of a dumb fool would pick one career that they decide at the age of 16 because they chose science or commerce or humanities
and stick with it till 60?
Marry into that for the rest of their lives when the world is changing.
But is India ready for youngsters making that choice? Because, so many times we hear that we are still, structured in our approaches. Even when employees may not be, employers are.
Yeah.
So if employers are structured in their approaches, I know people who struggle to sell car loans after selling home loans. That's how structured employers are.
Yes.
So where do we have that meeting of minds between people who want to explore and employers who are not willing to do that?
I think the space is opening up. You're very right. We're still evolving, and it's certainly not something that can be set for the entire country. But we are definitely in the best possible spot that we've ever been, because freelancing is a legitimate career now.
Yeah.
I work with a team that has never worked in a professional setting before. They're earning far more than what they would have earned if they followed the traditional path. And they're not an exception. It's not that they're exceptional at what they do. They're very common youngsters who just chose this path. And to the credit of their parents, they're also comfortable with that, which is a big decision because parents struggle to make that move in their head. And they most likely will never have a job. So they're sitting in India, they have a laptop and an internet connection, they're serving the entire world. They are freelancing their way through. Yes, the income goes up and down, but they understand how to navigate through that. And the same way, there are enough and more companies which are like, we don't want to be that traditional setup which just looks at a degree and the past experience and then qualifies someone. Yes, is that everyone? No. But has that shift happened and there are at least some examples where you can start exploring? 100% yes. Far more than what our time was, where there was just no option if somebody wanted to explore a completely unheard of trajectory from a professional career perspective.
Content creation has really taken off. I mean,
It
you know, there
has.
are like, last I checked, there were about 8-9 crore people who are doing content creation as a full-time occupation. Government recognizes that.
Yeah.
But, you know, there are many who say that what do content creators really build? I mean, you know, there are builders in the economy, you know, whether it's, you know, traditional sectors, technology. What exactly do content creators build? And that's a very legit question.
That's a very legit question. The truth is that we are living in what I call the attention economy. And the attention economy, for good or for bad, attributes a huge amount of value to where the attention of the population is. Because if you really think about it, attention today is a huge power move. If you have the ability to have somebody's attention, and I'm speaking to, of course, a media house that has done that commendably well for so long, you can truly influence. Now, the choice of what you want to influence remains yours. And there'll always be people who will go for something that you don't align with and something that you feel should be what is influenced by. But I'd say that let that be a democratic process and let not there be any rule or any diktat on how they should be. So there are a lot of people who will come and say, yeah, why are these influencers so vain? Why are they talking about their cars and their clothes and their makeup and so on? It's like, who are you to judge? Because there is a time and period where people love that kind of content and they find maybe hope, maybe inspiration, maybe confidence in that. Or maybe they will have to go through it to realize that it doesn't make any sense and they have to graduate to an intellectually superior piece. But you don't become the guardian of that, because it's almost like saying, hey, why don't we have all really good quality Bollywood movies? No, bro. It's entertainment for a lot of people. It's an escape for a lot of people. So don't be on your moral high ground and define what should be the order of culture or media. Just let it be. And if you're true to who you are, like I would never dance to appeal for the senses in my content, while I have for my sister because she's a dancer. I don't look down upon anybody who's doing that. And we're living in a generation where attention is such a powerful currency that it's not surprising people gravitate towards that.
Is attention economy making us trivial as people?
It certainly is, because it'll always be a very low common denominator. It's the same way that you would see any pop culture influence. Are the best songs the one which are the most valid lyrical songs? No. They are the ones which are crass lyrics and just music that entertains. Are the best movies the one which teach you a lot about life? No. They're the ones that entertain the most, and often in India it's like dimag ghar pe chhod ke aana. And those kind of movies work. But again, that's just the nature of how the entire world is. It's nothing to do with a country or specific. You will always have that 1% pushing the envelope forward. You'll have an 80% that just whiling away their time, doing things that, in my opinion, they shouldn't be doing, but again, who am I to judge? And there is this 19% which is making the transition.
Yeah.
And I'd say that that's enough. That's always enough.
Coming back to your book, where you've written about challenges, you've written about mentorship, I want to ask that, what about you? Did you face challenges? How did you overcome them? Because it's something that everybody faces, and more often than not, it is the answer to those challenges that define you. Sometimes you're not able to overcome them, and that's how your career trajectories get shaped.
Absolutely, I would 100% agree. I think if there's anybody who says that I've never failed or never faced any challenge, I'll show you a liar, because it's impossible for anybody to navigate life without them. I have faced a lot of challenges, and I think I'd like to believe I'm a really good example of how a career could be shaped, because I had a very solid plan for my life when I was growing up, which was to become a space scientist, go to the US, do a PhD, join NASA as a place to work. And I knew exactly how my life would unfold, until I just realized that's not the life that I ever wanted. I was just infatuated by that life, and I fell in love with it without even realizing that it was something that defined me or not. And I did go to the US, and I was pursuing my PhD, and after doing it for 2 years, I just realized I didn't want to do it anymore. So at the age of 24, I dropped out of that, came back to India, much to the dismay of my parents, and it wasn't an easy decision. This was 2004. Nobody used to drop out of education during that time.
Even now?
Well, now if I say that I'm a PhD dropout, people think I'm really cool.
Okay.
Because dropouts are the ones that are the rebels. Like, they are the ones who are like, oh my God, you dropped out of something, so you must be really, really cool. I was like, no, bro, that's not how it works.
But we live in times where Elon Musk is also a dropout, right?
Yeah, we just love putting all these rebels out there and says, see, drop out, you don't need to be. And Bill Gates dropped out, Mark Zuckerberg dropped out. No, but there are thousands who dropped out and didn't make it. Anyway, survivorship bias. The larger point is, I had to do a reset of my life at 24. I went for an MBA. Thankfully, that worked out. I went to a really good school, and it gave me the exposure that I wanted. More importantly, it gave me the realization of who I was and what I could be good at. And then I did consulting, and then in 2009, I became an entrepreneur. When entrepreneurship was not cool in this country, and people didn't know how to pronounce the word entrepreneur or spell it. Today, it's just so fashionable.
Again,
it's so cool. Like, I'm a CEO, I'm a founder, and peak Bengaluru and all that. So it was a very, very different time and era. And it was an intensely hard journey, Gaurie. I often say this, entrepreneurship is the most brutal form of self-discovery, because it will tell you who you truly are, because the market does not care about anything that you've done in life. It doesn't care about which school you went to, doesn't care how well you were as a student, doesn't care how you look, how you speak. It doesn't care two hoots about who you are.
Entrepreneurship is a leveler.
It's a leveler. It is a leveler, which is why I love it, because it taught me so much about what I'm good at, what I'm not, what are my blind spots, what kind of people I should be working with, what kind of people I should never be working with, so on. And you're so right that a large part of who I am today, if not the entire bit of it, is simply my failures helping me reflect on how I should live my life.
You celebrate failures.
I do.
And you talk about them. And the one thing we realize is in India as a society, and I speak for everybody, probably me as a parent as well, I cannot bring myself to celebrate failure, because what kind of an example would I set for my children, for my child? And that holds true for most parents, isn't it? So that's the dichotomy, right? You have youngsters or people like you talking to youngsters to be okay with failures, and society at large refusing to accept that.
Yes, it is a hard path to travel. In our culture, there are two approaches to failure. One is do anything and everything to avoid failure. That's the first default. Don't fail. Just don't fail. Which puts intense pressure on people, because they just start thinking of failure as something that is just so undesirable. But the worst, in my opinion, is when people do fail, we're like, it's okay, move on. Quick, move on. Like, bade deshon mein choti baatein hoti rehti hai. Just move on. We never really allow anybody to say, why don't you reflect on this failure and recognize what is it that you shouldn't be doing again? Because if you repeat a failure, that's actually the failure.
Yeah.
The failure is not failing the first time. The failure is failing the second time at exactly the same thing that you failed at the first time. Because that's just so unnecessary. And it could have been very well avoided if you just took the moment to reflect. So I believe as parents, we can do whatever we want, but we can never avoid our kids from failing. What we can do, I feel our responsibility, is whenever they fail, sit with them so that they know how to process a failure. And that will start with just emotions. Let them cry, let them feel sad, let them feel embarrassed, let them feel guilty, let them feel fearful. Whatever is it that they're feeling, let them process that. Because once that emotion is over, and they are somewhat tired, if you will, start asking difficult questions. Why do you think that happened? What is it that you believed would come true that you now know did not come true? What is it that you thought would never happen, but now you know did happen? How are you going to change that from next time onwards? And I feel these conversations don't happen. They're just dismissed, pushed under the rug, because we're just so embarrassed to even admit it at our own individual level.
Yes.
So I do, it's a whole new journey, and I can speak about parenting, and I hope next year when the book, my next book, by the way, is on relationships, and parenting will be a huge part of it. Oh. So hopefully next year we'll have a conversation to sit again. I can go on and on about parenting, because I genuinely believe that that's one profession that the world absolutely sucks at, and is the most important profession of all professions out there.
Yeah, indeed. But, which brings me to ask you that a lot of YouTubers, when they give advice, they're generalists, like you're giving money advice, you're giving career advice, you're going to give parenting advice. A lot of people are going to turn around and say, at some point of time, specialists should take over. How long will generalists keep giving advice? Is there something you face that, how can one person give all the gyan?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I face it all the time. And I don't blame them, because that should be the default. But what I think about this is, none of this is coming from what I would call borrowed experiences. I'm very happy that I'm creating content at 44 and not 24, because at 44, I can actually lay claim to everything that I speak. Like nothing in this book is fiction. Nothing in this book is borrowed literature. Nothing in this book is borrowed experience. It's what I have been through and learned. The same thing with parenting. Was I speaking about parenting or had any point of view on parenting 10 years back? No. Today I do. Not a strong point of view, but an emerging point of view. When you meet me 20 years hence, you may just realize that all of my experiments as a parent failed. And I'm like, you know what? I
got it all wrong. Yeah.
I just got it all wrong. My kids, they don't love me. And I think I messed up. But at least I tried. So the outcome is still WIP, if you will. But what I do is, and I'm very conscious of it, is none of my content is about prescriptions. It isn't about do this, have to do this. It is always about consider this. This is another point of view. This is another point of view. So I often say this, and this is the first line in anything that I stand for, is awareness is everything. Because if you make your decisions from a point of awareness, you don't end up making better decisions, you just have more confidence in your decision. That's the only difference. And if we had confidence in our decisions, we'd be a very different person. But we end up making decisions from a point of ignorance. We don't know any better, and that's why. It's like in class 11th, why did I pick up science? Only because I got good marks. That's it. I had no idea what it is to become an engineer or a scientist or anything else. I was like, nahi, अच्छे number आए हैं, so you take up science. And अगर कोई family business है या मम्मी पापा CA हैं or something like that, you pick up CA. And the most messed up thing in our education system is that if you don't score well, you pick up humanities.
Yeah.
What kind of logic is that? Just doesn't make sense.
Arts is a derivative of marks, yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Like, it's never a choice.
Yeah.
And it's certainly not a point of awareness, if you will.
But then, are people now becoming dismissive of important occupations? I meet people who say, content creators. So many of them say, I make more money, as you mentioned, that, some of your team members make more money than traditional occupations. But then, are we being dismissive of some very important occupations or people who put so much of their energy, time in learning complex things, whether it is medicine or whether it's any of the other professions? I mean, at the end of the day, you need to spend hours to be able to gain that expertise.
Absolutely. I wouldn't call it dismissal. What I would say there is just like a Maslow's hierarchy, there is still a significant part of our country whose orbit will change simply because of education and nothing else. They don't have to do anything else. They don't have to go to the fanciest schools. They don't have to learn from the fanciest teachers. Just the fact that they get an education will change their orbit that they were born in. And that's true for, I would argue, 60 to 70% of this country. And people like us, we're like not even 1% of this country. We surrounded ourselves with such people, so we think this is the entire world. It's not. For us, our kids, they are not about survival anymore, because forget us, our parents have done all the hard work. We were born, at least I'd argue that the fact that my parents were educated set me up for a whole new trajectory in my life, because they knew that they would go for a good convent education, they would go for a good college, we will struggle hard to send them to the finest colleges, blah, blah, blah. That order was already defined in that sense. So now our kids are like, oh, which country will we send our kids to study, and which company will they join, or maybe they'll start their own business, or maybe they'll take over our business. Their choices are ridiculous. But that percentage is really, really small. So if that 1% is dismissive of somebody trying to become a doctor or an engineer, I would say, you know what, screw you. You don't even matter. Because that 60-70% who's really struggling to clear that JEE or clear that UPSC or clear that NEET or clear that law exam, and actually do it, their life will change.
Who do you talk to, the 1% or the 60%?
Oh, I'm always talking to the 60%. I don't care about that 1%. I could very well hang out in my ISB, really fancy cocoon, and not being dismissive of any sort. But I'm so lucky that as a 44-year-old, I get to spend time with 20-year-olds. I'm so lucky that because of my reach, I'm speaking to people that I have no way of reaching out to if I were to try on my own. Because I get to hear from, like this book when we did the pre-launch, I was just looking at the data today, 312 cities ordered this book, 312. And Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, Kolkata, which has the highest population, if you will, their total percentage was less than 10%. So 90% of this book has been ordered by outside of the large cities. Cities whose spellings I wouldn't even know. Forget hearing their names, the pin codes or whatnot. But I'm just so happy that it's reaching out to them. So that's why I speak mostly in English. That's why my content is around that. That's why I'm speaking at a level where, frankly, a lot of my batchmates are like, why are you wasting your life? Like, why are you speaking about things which are so commonsensical? I'm like, do you even smell the privilege when you make that statement? Like, for you, compounding and mutual funds is an obvious thing to do, but there are people who have no idea what compounding is. They've never even studied it in their life. They don't even have a single individual around them, including their teachers in their government school, who have any concept of what compounding is, or how to think about a career, or how to become a freelancer. And I don't want to be on that moral high ground and be like, oh no, I'm only speaking to the elite. In fact, the startup that I run, I was very conscious that I wanted to create content and curriculum which was mass market and not catering to the elite. I have nothing against the elite, but I think they're served very well in this country.
If there's one advice you would want to give to the Education Minister of India, what would that be?
Oh, I would simply say that this country does not have a dearth of students who want to learn. This country has a terrible, terrible lack of good quality teachers. And you cannot hire or train good quality teachers in the numbers that we need. You have to use technology to overcome this barrier. I remember this fascinating, and this was my, I think this large moment, if you will, interview of Elon Musk. And he was speaking about education. So he gave this really fine example. He said, have you seen the movie Dark Knight? And the interviewer was like, oh, yeah, of course I've seen it. I said, did you like the movie? He's like, I love the movie. Great movie. He said, imagine if I gave you the script of Dark Knight. And I said, why don't you give the script to every cinema hall in the country? And now go and make this movie. What will happen? Every cinema hall, depending on their financial strength, their budget, will create a completely different picture. They will use a different cast, they will use different visual effects, different music, different production, set, whatnot. So imagine the exact same script with the power of all that it brings will be a terrible experience at every single cinema hall level, and only a few would do a really good job because they have the economic wherewithal to do it. That's exactly how education is today. It's the same laws, the same concepts, which you learned in economics was exactly the same thing that somebody at Stanford or LSE, where you also went, was learning. But you happen to go to a really good college, and that's why you learn from the finest. There's a government school in this country that does not have that fine education, has the exact same macro and microeconomic principles being taught. Do a piss poor job of it. You have to standardize education at that fundamental level. That's my belief. That's what I'm working towards. That's what I would love to change. Imagine if there are magnum opuses, dark nights created of every conceptual concept that a student needs to know. And it's designed by the best director / instructor in the world or from this country. Doesn't matter.
So tech may come in courses, but then, a lot of people say tech may replace people. I mean, AI is going to replace people. So what happens then?
I don't have the answer to that. And I think it's still emerging. I do believe that most of us will be out of jobs. What I don't know is whether that'll be a good thing or not. A lot of people would argue it's not a good thing. I'd say that it could be a very good thing because then we will actually go back to our roots where we had the time to actually wonder. Today we've just become machines. And if you take the economic element out, which is why do we actually work? We work Not so much because of the purpose or the fulfillment that it gives, why that should have been the first reason. We work because we just want money, because money is necessary in this world. But what if that is taken care of? Let's imagine that that is taken care of. I'm not talking about universal basic income or anything like that, but just as a construct, just imagine if that's taken care of. What would you do with your time?
Yeah.
What would you do with everything that you can do with your time? And yes, there'll be some people who will while away their time. There'll be some people who will actually devote that to progressive things. There'll be some people who will devote it to the upliftment of others. And I think the world would be a very fascinating, certainly a very different world from what it is today, where everyone's just in this rat race. And we all have things that we could have done with our time, but we're not doing because we got here, by will or by force.
So that's an important point. But what about work-life balance? And I see a lot of and hear a lot of people who are fabulous at content creation and star YouTubers like yourself. They talk about number of hours that they put in. Probably less than what some people put in 2 days. And there are some who say, there are CEOs who say work 90 hours a week. How do you see that happening?
I think it's a...
And when was the last time you did 90 hours a week?
I've done a lot of 90 hours to now not hopefully need it. I do say, very much like how Mr. Mahindra put it in one of the conversations after the 90-hour dialogue went out, is it's always the outcome that matters more than the input of the number of hours. I work for less than 20 hours a week, but I'd argue that those 20 hours are extremely productive because I use a lot of technology. I've built a team around which, again, doesn't slog their ass off and have a miserable life, but they're also in control of their time. But we work in such a way where we know that collectively we are delivering a lot more than if we were to just become machines, if you will, of human output.
Is that the future of working 20 hours or 90 hours? What is that future?
If you ask me, Gaurie, I don't think humans were designed to work for more than 20, 30 hours a week. We're not built. We've been forced to, and a lot of us choose to do so willfully or not. So all those who actually say we should work for 70 hours a week, we should work for 90 hours a week, they do it themselves. I don't think there's anyone who's ever said that, including the ones that made those remarks. We don't have to name them, but you know who they are. They have done that in their life. It's not that it's coming from this point of, oh, I'm the founder, I'm the CEO, so I want you all to work. They do it themselves because they love their work. It's not work for them. It isn't. I can't imagine. I've been in the startup business for 16 years. I've run businesses. I was telling this to Ruchi, my wife, as well, yesterday, in fact. I understand how a founder thinks. So when Mr. Murthy says that everyone ought to work for 70 hours a week, it's because he has done it. And he knows why it works. And he knows why it's necessary. And it knows why it is one of the biggest reasons why Infosys is Infosys today. And it wouldn't have been if it wasn't for that. But if you hear it as an employee, it of course will be like, who the F are you to say that? Like, you're paying me peanuts and now you want me to do it and so on and so forth. But bro, it's your choice. He's not mandating it as a legal binding thing. He's saying, if you want to win, there is a great way for you to consider working 70 hours a week and win. It's a great way for you to own your own business, give everything that you have, and see it prosper like I have. I'm not coming from a point of, again, as I said, shared experiences or shared literature where somebody else told me you should work for 70 hours and that's why I'm telling it to you. I've done it myself, far more than I've even prescribed to anybody else.
Yeah, I guess founders, when they do it, they speak from a different passion that no employee can ever share. I mean, it's only just logical. They just can't share that passion.
Or for that matter, I'd argue a lot of people who just genuinely love their work, I don't think you'll ever find them complaining about the number of hours. I created this video yesterday and I said, there are 5 reasons why your work creates stress in your life. And one of them is work-life balance, or at least the mismatch of work-life balance. But you have to recognize that if you are working at a place that you truly, truly enjoy, you will actually never ask this question. So it's very easy for one to say, oh, you know what, companies like Amazon or Tesla or SpaceX or Zomato and so on, they have a very toxic work culture. They work very intense hours and so on. But the ones who are really successful in those organizations and have thrived in those organizations, I don't think any one of them is complaining. It's only the ones who are complaining whose culture is not aligned with the personality that they are. So what were you expecting? If you're somebody who, by personality, by nature, is not that, then it's almost like a fish being asked to climb a tree, and you're then complaining that, why am I asked to climb a tree?
But the fact is that's where all the jobs are, right?
No, not true. I wouldn't say so. I really feel, and this is, again, I'm always very conscious of not bringing in my privilege here. I think that's an excuse. It's an excuse for not doing the hard work of finding which is the right place for me. Or believing, worse, that you're not in a capacity to make that choice.
Okay, then let me rephrase it.
Please.
If some of these companies who've actually said, these 90 hours, 70 hours, 80 hours, they will still be the day zero employers on any campus, won't they?
Yes, but there'll also be Mahindra and Mahindra who said, we're not. And if you were to just take things at face value, then you'll be like, no, I want to work there, but I'm not ready to work the way they want me to work. That's not how it happens.
Okay.
When you play a game whose rules are defined by somebody else, you do not get to define the rules. So you have two choices. Either play a game whose rules you like, or design your own game.
Okay.
You cannot be entering chess and saying, I don't like the horse playing 2.5 steps.
That'll be your next book, I guess, huh? Write epic game or something like that. Okay.
Change the epic game.
Change the epic game.
Change the epic game.
Fascinating conversation, but as we wrap this up, there are some rapid fire questions that my team has given,
Let's
and
do
they're
that.
also in the same age group, of almost in that same age group that you cater to the most. And they have said that Ankur must reply in one quick line.
Okay, I'll try my
Which
best.
is entrepreneurship or mentorship?
Oh, entrepreneurship, any day.
Success or happiness?
Happiness.
Risk taking or playing it safe?
Oh, risk taking, any day.
Building a company or building a personal brand?
Building a company, for sure.
Big ideas or small sustainable steps?
Small, sustainable steps.
Would you rather face criticism from peers or customers?
Customers, any day.
Work-life balance or hustle culture?
Work-life balance.
I thought that was a close one. But in your early career, struggling with failure or enjoying quick wins?
No, struggling with failure.
Rift with Ashneer Grover. I will give you 2 sentences for this, not one.
I can't explain it. That's the only sentence I have. I've never met him. I don't know him. I don't know what's up with him, but I wish him the best.
But what was it? Public fallout, or would you have preferred a private resolution?
No, I will respond if I know what the genesis is, but I'll be dumb if I'm just responding to something that's thrown in thin air.
You never reached out to him to ask
Why
what's
would
happening?
I? No, of course. I don't know him. I have no contact with him. I've never met him. So I don't know what's happening. So it's all speculation. And the media house is like, oh, do you want to respond? Like, what? Respond to what, bro? I don't even know what happened. Okay. Because I have no idea. And I certainly don't take any of this to heart. It doesn't inflect me. My life is just so gainful. Couldn't care less.
Finally, would you rather mentor an aspiring entrepreneur or work alongside them in a startup?
Oh, that's a... If I'm 20, I would work alongside an entrepreneur, a founder. But at this age, I would love to mentor aspiring founders.
All right, fascinating. Thank you so much for this
Thank you,
conversation,
Gaurie.
Ankur. It was an eye-opener for me as well.
Well, I'm glad. Thank you so much.
I'm as straight-jacketed as one would be, ticking all the right boxes, but just as it opened my eyes, I'm hopeful that it'll open the viewers' eyes as well.
I am glad we had this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.